Well, it's not a Friday night, but it is an evidence-based triathlete podcast night. Sunday, my goodness.
Yeah, and it's funny because it seems like this is the way it's going to be maybe for the summer, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
everyone gets busy in the summer. It's funny, we talk about this in the winter. Everyone's busy with work, but now everyone's busy with like triathlon stuff. And so, yeah, so thanks for everybody that's joining us on a Sunday night. We do appreciate it.
Yeah, and we have a special guest tonight. Typically, our podcast, even though we call ourselves evidence-based triathlete, it's really two guys talking triathlon. So, but tonight we've got a special guest. We've got Donna Gould here. Hi, Donna. How are you?
Hello. Hello. I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me. This is awesome.
Oh, this is great. And you recently earned your master's degree, and I
I
was on your
did.
committee, and I really enjoyed what you talked about. And so afterwards, we talked, and we said, "Got to have you on the podcast." So,
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank
this is great.
you.
And tonight we're going to talk about nutrition. And I told my wife asked me before I came upstairs to do this. She said, "What's your topic?" I said, "Nutrition." And she said, "You better take notes because I am notorious for not really doing well with my nutrition. So unless macaroni and cheese and Pop Tarts are on the good list, then I'm usually in trouble." So, but we want to jump into that. But we also want to do a quick race weekend recap, which I think some people are still racing as we are podcasting now, doing
Yeah,
Ironman
our number
also.
one fan, Rick, I think he's at, was he like mile 20 on
Is
the
he
on the
still in the
run?
lead? He was winning his age
Yeah,
group when I checked last.
yeah. Last time I looked, he was still winning his age group. So go, Rick. I'm
Yeah.
sure he's gonna listen to this later. But we've been
70,
tracking him today.
74 age group. That's amazing and super
Yeah,
fast still. So,
awesome
but-
stuff.
well, Ted, do you want to give a quick recap of Morro Bay's 70.3?
Yeah, so we had the inaugural Ironman 70.3 Morro Bay this weekend, yesterday, and it was everything it was built up to be.
Yeah, yeah.
I've been kind of nervous about this race because it was supposedly going to be the coldest swim I'd ever done in a race. They said the temperature was 58 when we started. I don't know, it seems like a little colder than that to me, but I actually wore booties for the first time in a race, and
Okay.
actually that did help.
Yeah.
But it really was an interesting race because it was super early start. I've never started so early. It was a 6
Hmm.
a.m.
Oh,
start for
wow.
age
That
group.
is early. Yeah.
There was no pros, so I mean, we were in the water. I was in the water, I think, at 6:10.
Mm,
That's an early morning for me.
yeah.
So cold water harbor swim. I was super fortunate that I found somebody's feet and basically held them for 90% of
Mhm.
the swim. So that was super for me because I
Yeah.
actually had a decent swim. And then just like the little things that happen that you don't expect. And this is what kind of this triathlon show is about, is some things that are kind of, I guess, new. Is on my last breath getting out of the water, I actually breathed in ocean water.
Oh,
And so I'm coming out of the water and I'm like coughing.
yeah.
And of course, the medical people, they're all, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I can't even tell them I'm okay because I'm like coughing up seawater. And I'm thinking, man, I gotta get to my bike. So anyways, finally I cleared my throat and I get to
You're
my bike
getting
and I
your
get on the bike.
electrolytes in.
I was definitely getting my sodium in for sure. I don't want it in my lungs. That's the only thing. So really, actually, it was a nice swim because it was in a harbor and it was relatively calm. Got onto the bike. The bike was relatively calm. It's an out and back if you've been to the area on the Pacific Coast Highway. So it's basically 26 miles up. There's a mile in town or
Mhm.
mile and a half in town. Maybe 27 miles up and then turn around, come back. And rolling hills. So a couple little climbs you had to do. And then catching a tailwind on the way back, which was super nice. I think I averaged 26 miles an hour coming back, which is kind
That's
of
nice. Yeah.
fast.
Yeah.
No, it was interesting, when the miles are ticking away. I think I averaged 20, almost 21 on the way out, and then 26 on the way back. So I think I averaged 23 for the ride. But watching those miles tick down when you're doing 26, 27,
Yeah.
it's kind of fun. You're like, oh man, and you're calculating in your head, when am I going to actually get to the transition zone? Oh my
Yeah,
gosh,
great.
this is going to be a really good bike split. And so I actually end up with the best bike split in my age group, which was super exciting. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was second into T2, or out of T2, I was in second place. And we've talked about it a little bit on the podcast. I've been having hip issues for quite a while and haven't really been running much. I've actually been running on the supported treadmill, which we did a podcast on exclusively since Oceanside. And so I was a little nervous. So my plan was to overbike it. So I overbiked it, just thinking, survive the run. And I took a little conservative on the run in the beginning, and I ended up running like 6:45 pace, or sorry, 7:47. I wish 6:45. 7:45 pace for a 1:42 half marathon, and ended up 5th place. And so we got on the podium.
That's awesome.
And super excited. I was a little bit sad because we'd had plans to do things that afternoon because it was going to be such an early finish to the race. I'm like, well, we don't have to go to the roll down because the people I'm traveling with, we already have our spots to Finland. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, well, I guess our plans, we have to go back to the awards ceremony. I mean, everyone go back to the awards ceremony. That's part of the reason we had to put on the podcast to go do that. But so really successful. As far as the race, I would encourage people to do it. Honestly, the roads were so good. The run course was, I would call it rolling. The run course was rolling. A few punchy little climbs and good support from the town. Beautiful place. So yeah, if it's not on your radar for next year, maybe think about putting it on your radar for next year. And cold weather. I think the run was at 55 degrees. So we don't get too many chances to race in the cold, especially in the summer. So once again, I highly suggest it.
That's awesome.
So
congrats.
Talk about your race. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and congrats on the podium. Anytime you get a podium at a national race like that, that's really impressive. So, mine was a shorter one. I did the Olympic up in San Halo. Love our BBSC races, and that was just a perfect day. I also camped out, so it was bonus to be able to camp out, burn stuff, and use my trailer. Right, it was parked right on the water's edge. I'll add in some nutrition stuff here because this is where I want to tap into Donna's expertise on the mistakes I'm making. But it was a really great day. I got up, I had my oatmeal for breakfast, and then some coffee, and then got over to transition and got set up. And then Donna, I did have some Pop-Tarts before, so I don't know, strawberry, not the iced one, just the plain Pop-Tarts. And then, it's funny, I got started and the swim, if anyone did San Halo, the swim was actually really tough because we could not see the first buoy. And all we needed to do really was just swim right towards the sun because the buoy was right in line with the sun perfectly. And so couldn't see a thing until I just kept following the sun, and I eventually ran into where the buoy was. So that was good. But then, it's funny, actually, I had a really good swim, got out, and I was hungry. And fortunately, I did have a gel on my bike with me, and I ate a gel within the first 3 miles, and that sort of carried me over. And then the rest of the way, I mostly was just taking water, not really even drinking water, more swishing and spitting, which I know Donna knows I'm a big fan of that. And we've talked about that in class quite a bit. And then, really felt like I could push the run and stay in control, and ended up 3rd overall. And I just got home about a couple hours ago, and I just checked the results, and I got 3rd place by 3 seconds.
Oh man, that guy in 4th place was like, yes, sir.
And it was and this is just always race the clock. And I know when I was running, San Halo's notorious for having an uphill finish. I was running up that hill, and I'm like, I got to run as if there's someone just neck to neck to me right now. And I tried to do whatever I could to sprint and finish that. And fortunately, came out on the higher end. He would have been catching me, so it would have been really interesting where he would have caught me right at probably that top of the hill. And then I always say, that's fine. Catch me at the top of the hill. If I can see the finish line, I'm going to beat you. So, but it was a lot of fun. And technically, I'll also give a shout out to the 1st place person who's actually in my same age group, 55, 59. And so I would have been 2nd in my age group. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was 55, 59 was very competitive in each of the distances. So,
well, that's great. Well,
all right.
Congratulations.
So, yeah, thanks.
I'm impressed by you, John. making overall podiums. That's your second one in a row, by the way,
Yeah.
for overall podium. So congratulations.
Well, thanks, and fun to have a little bit of race left in the old legs, but now let's get into my Pop-Tart issue. So, Donna, this is nutrition is really the fourth discipline of triathlon. And
Yes.
I know both Ted and I really focus a lot on our race day nutrition, even our race week nutrition. And so it was fun to post a question to everyone or just to throw it out there as an open topic. And I was so impressed with the depth and breadth of questions that people put down.
I was
And
too.
I sent them to you, and I'm like, this is intimidating. I would, I don't
I had
know.
some work. I had some work to do.
I know. And so before we jump into the questions, maybe Donna, it would be great for the folks to get to know you a little bit.
Sure.
And yeah, maybe give us your academic and athletic background.
Sure, absolutely. So, hello, my name is Donna Gould, and very excited to be here. I'm a registered dietitian, and I've been a dietitian for about almost 2 years. And I have my bachelor's in science, nutrition science from UNLV. And then I just got my master's in science, in nutrition science from UNLV. And my passion is obviously nutrition, but I love sports. I'm an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
I started running. I'm not a triathlete. I have to full disclosure, I'm not a triathlete. But I started running very young, and probably my first race, I was about first grade, and my city had this like 1 mile race, and I'm 6 years old, and I'm doing a mile. I don't know if that was safe at the time, but yeah, so I've been running ever since. I was a sprinter in high school and college, and then in my 20s and 30s, I got into marathon running. And so that's where I've run several marathons. I wanted to get into ultra marathon running, but then that's when I decided to go back to school. I realized that yes, nutrition's our fuel. So if you really, and I'm so in tune with taking care of my body. I grew up in a very healthy household. I grew up with other athletes as well in my household. My uncle went to Syracuse, played football and lacrosse. My brother played Division I basketball. So I have a lot of athletes in my family. And we all grew up very healthy, eating very well. I'm very lucky. I always like to tell people I'm not one of those dietitians that grew up like, kind of on the unhealthy side. I was very healthy growing up, very aware of how how eating influenced our body. So when it became time for me to become a dietitian, I was like, I'm going to be a sports dietitian. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to work with athletes. And full disclosure, I am not a sports dietitian. I have worked with athletes. I'm an athlete myself. I've trained myself. But right now, for the past 2 years, I have been doing weight management. That's my specialty, obviously incorporating physical activity into that. But I obviously can counsel athletes, but I just wanted full disclosure. I do not specialize in sports nutrition. So what would that be the difference? So for example, I'm going to give you a lot of guidance tonight, and I'm going to give you a lot of information. A sports dietitian might say, oh, I know the exact product that you should get. They might know more about the products, maybe know more about ergonomic aids, more. There was a great question about ketones, and I'm like, that's a great question. I'm just going to go to the science. So, and that's what my profession is. I am science-based. When people ask me what is the difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist, number one, as a dietitian, I practice medical nutrition therapy, meaning I can work with disease states. And that's mostly what I do. I work with people who mostly have obesity, type 2 diabetes, any renal disease. A nutritionist can also provide nutrition advice, but I would definitely recommend, especially for all of you, if you're an endurance athlete, elite athlete, absolutely consult with a dietitian. And if you want to get really specific advice on exact products and helping you with a specific diet, especially a ketogenic diet, I would say talk to a sports dietitian. Which leads me into one of the most intriguing and kind of thought-provoking questions that I kept seeing on Facebook that you kept giving to me, was a lot of questions about using fat as an energy source.
Mhm.
And I thought that's awesome, and
Yeah.
where everyone's mind is going. Yeah.
Well, and I love that. I want to get into that because I love, and you put together a presentation. We'll bring up the slides as you want to, whichever way. But I just got to say, what caught my ear, because one, we've known each other. You've taken 2 classes with me, 1 class.
Yes, I've taken your
Yeah.
classes. Yes, your classes are awesome. And I actually did
Yeah.
a presentation for your group on how to acclimate in the heat.
Oh, that's right, right.
Yes.
But you've always had a really good knack of asking interesting questions yourself, and always having just this genuine interest in learning. But what I really caught my ear when you did your presentation for your degree was that you talked about a wide range of things that influence, in this case, it was weight management, it wasn't just the nutrition, it was cognitive behavior therapy. I mean, you really covered the whole spectrum. And a lot of us triathletes struggle not only with just knowing how many calories to take in or what to do, but it's the more broad part of nutrition. So I applaud you for taking that approach, and that's why I think it's great to have you on here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. But Pop-Tarts, back to your coming full circle, Pop-Tarts, hey, they're quick energy if your GI can tolerate.
That's right.
I probably would personally, I would want something a little more sustaining
Yeah.
energy, but hey, if you need that quick energy, go for it.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you. I am taking that note, and I'm going to go take it to my wife after we're done here. So, all right. So the question that caught your eye was the fat as an energy source.
Yeah. So I'm actually, do you want me to go in or actually, should I go in order, or I can start? Let me start it. I can start at the beginning and kind of
Okay.
work my way to the fat, because it's nice. It's a nice build up.
Yeah.
I know I'm leaving like a cliffhanger. I have like a cliffhanger going.
Okay. Oh, nice.
Because I think the most thumbs up were about how much carbs should I take in an hour and how often.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like carbs, because I'm a traditional dietitian, and as an athlete, I use carbohydrates as my energy source. Full disclosure, as my main energy source, I'm going to use carbohydrates. I'll talk about fat as the main energy source. But do you want to pull up the slides, or do you want me to just talk?
Yeah, let me, I'll
Okay.
share from my screen, and that should
Yeah,
work.
go ahead.
Okay.
No, I'm big on, our 3 nutrients all serve a huge purpose. And that's another topic for another day, is, we can go into more about what each of the nutrients do. But I'm one of those dietitians that always is going to promote carbohydrates as the main energy source, especially for our heart and brain. And I'll get more into that in a second. So this question came from, we can show the notes, or you're all going to get this PowerPoint anyway.
All right, let me see if I can do that. Is that
So I wanted to make this PowerPoint because some of these questions, they're not very simple answers. And I wanted everyone to be watching to just relax and be able to listen and not have to feel like they're taking notes, not feel like they have to retain everything. And so I figured this would just be a lot easier for everyone. So how much carbs should I take per hour and how often? This was a great question from Yoshi. And I'm always going to use science. You're all going to see that all my answers are going to be science-based, evidence-based. What is the science telling us? So for extended energy, anything greater than 60 minutes. Some of you know this already, but we should be consuming anywhere from 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates an hour. And it should be in a solution of about 6 to 8% carbs. That window.
Oh, sorry.
That's
me.
okay, no worries. And we should be, and the science really shows that for the most effective performance, really taking in carbohydrates every 10 to 20 minutes. So what does that look like? That's going to be about most 8-ounce sports drinks are going to be about 14 to 18 grams of carbs. So it's about 14 to 18 grams of carbs in that time frame, every 10 to 20 minutes, if that makes sense. And then you want to make sure it's a 6 to 8% solution. And I'll get into more in terms of on the next, I think it's the next slide. Yeah, next slide about the ratio of carbohydrates, which should we have? Yeah, single carbohydrate, multiple carbohydrates. But ideally, you want to be getting anywhere from 30 to 60 grams. And you should be consuming about every 10 to 20 minutes. I did see someone, yeah, go ahead.
So you're going, and you're just going fast. I'm actually taking notes as we go here.
Okay.
So you said your average sports drink, like a Gatorade, is 8 ounces.
Yeah, if you want to go back to that first slide. So the average, okay, yes.
Okay. So if 8 ounces is 14 grams, I'm just doing my math here. That means I would have to take in how many ounces per hour?
So if you're doing about, so
8 times 4, 32.
8 ounces per fluid ounces. And
32, that's about 32 ounces, right? So, and I'm just thinking of the race, for example, that I did yesterday. So I was out there for 5 hours. So 32 times 5, that's 160 ounces of sports drink. Does that sound reasonable?
That's a great question. The next step is I would need to sit down and do some math. So this is where it gets individualized. I would need to sit down with you. I also want to take into consideration, as we'll see, what level of intensity you're exercising at. So yeah, these are just general guidelines, right? General guidelines for most people. Most 8-ounce sports drinks are going to be in that 14 to 18 gram range, 4 to 10. I'm telling you, probably don't want to go above 8%. So really, in terms of how much you should be drinking, I would be looking at what you're drinking, if that makes sense.
And why I'm going down this road is not to trick you or trap you or anything.
No, this is a tricky question.
In reality, 160 ounces,
it's a lot.
Like especially in a cold race, right? Yeah. I'm not sweating, so I'm sweating a little, right? But I'm not losing a lot to sweat. So then what ends up happening is this is what me, like as a triathlete, is going to do. Is I'm going to probably only be able to take in 5 hours, maybe 64 to 80 ounces. And then the rest is going to come from food, right? And the food is going to be gels. So when I start putting gels in, now the percentage goes way up. It goes up to like 14, 18, 20%.
It's too high.
Well, but here's the thing. It's too high from the science, but I need as many I need calories, right?
Right.
So I can't balance this math out. I can't drink that amount.
Right.
So I have to put food, and then I can't keep the balance. And the truth of the matter is no endurance athlete that's going that long unless it's very hot can actually get this in. And I've tried, like I've worked the math many times on this. And even if I'm running through aid stations, like when I'm running, just getting that amount of fluid in to get that number. So what I've had to do, and this is what I suggest people do, is train my gut, right? And I know this is something you have on your slides later, is to train your gut. So I think that 8% number is on an untrained gut. So that being said, I know we're kind of bouncing around. What's your thoughts on training your gut to be able to take in a higher concentration?
Absolutely. And that's what my next slide was going to be, was absolutely training our gut. And I think someone even said that on Facebook, that they were training themselves to go up to 90, I believe. And that's what the recommendation is. If you want to go to the
and
yes.
Some elite triathletes, especially in the Ironman and half Ironman distance, are training themselves, and it's documented. They're doing 120 to 150.
I heard that actually. Yeah. I was like, wow. Yes. So
well,
yeah.
So
and
because you have to.
I'll actually. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Go ahead, Dad.
No, go.
No, I was just gonna say I've heard up to like ultra elite athletes have been doing up to 120. But if you can get yourself up to 90 grams, I think that would be really the ideal.
Well,
But I think it's not even the grams. I think it's also the concentration.
Right.
Because
Right.
like I teach this in my athletic training course as well. Okay, it's really that 8% solution, but you drink that 8% solution and then you have a gel on top of it. Now you've taken that to 14%.
well,
Right?
and
Because
I'll
nobody
throw,
takes just gels.
yeah, I'll throw in that, and I like the idea of the training the gut, but it's really understanding what it means to take in 60 grams per hour or 80 grams or 90 grams. I think far too many of us really do not know at the end of the day what we're taking in during the course of it. We may have a plan, we may have things laid out, but at the end of the day, like you said, Ted, you go through an aid station, maybe you get a sip of something, you don't actually get the full drink, or you drop something, or you don't actually get all the gel out of the gel container. And I think far too many of us really don't know exactly what we are taking in. And so I like that, the training part, because you gotta try to do it during training, and to try to get in 60 grams per hour or 90 grams per hour. That's a lot more than it seems.
Yeah, and
It's
remember,
work.
yeah, it is. And remember, 60 grams is only about 240 calories.
Yeah.
It's not a lot. I mean, you're burning, the average runner is burning about 100 calories a mile.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we only have, I mean, we'll get to this, but we only have a certain amount of stores of carbohydrates. We can only store about 300 to 400 grams of carbohydrates.
Great point.
That gets us to, some of us, that only gets us to mile 12 to 16, I think, of a marathon. So yeah, I think as much as you can train yourself, I mean, and what you said too, Ted, some of this too, I don't mean to not sound scientific, but some of this too is going to be anecdote, like I tried this and it worked.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to discount that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to discount that at all. I mean, some of you, like I'm not going to minimize 3 seconds. Like if it got you your 3 second, better time. So yeah, so I'm not going to say just because this is what the science says. Absolutely, there is a lot of room for this is what I did and it worked.
Well, I think if we go a little bit deeper into this topic, and I think because I love this topic, this is one of my favorite topics. We really go into it is like you not only training your gut, but testing yourself. Yeah. Like, have you ever been out on a training where you did like a 4-hour bike ride at this intensity that you're going to race at? Mm-hmm. Let's say you're doing, whatever, like 70% of your VO2, and tried 100 grams an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Exactly.
And what happened to you? Were you fine? Because if you're fine, then you're fine, right? And it's just like, well, the science says this, but we also know that there's outliers on both sides of the science. If you feel like you've got an iron gut and you can do it and you can take it in, because that's the downside, right? Is gastrointestinal distress.
Yes.
If you can do this without GI distress, then do it. Don't just be like, well, the science says this. Like,
exactly.
Actually, when we go to, if I get a new pair of running shoes, I'm going to test them out before my marathon, right? But oftentimes athletes are really, especially endurance athletes, are so concerned about every calorie and, I want to train a little bit hungry and I want, and they don't train this side. They'll do that 4-hour bike ride or they'll do that 2-hour run. And it's a perfect opportunity to test this, but they won't. They'll just be like, okay, I'm gonna earn my next meal. Mm-hmm. Right? I'm gonna burn 2,000 calories. So then when I get home, I can sit in front of the refrigerator and gorge myself on ice cream for the next hour. I've done it, and that's not really helping you.
I 100% agree. Training is the time to really test things out. And you're making a great point. Like we have to train, what can our body handle? What one person, there's a saying, oh, don't eat fiber. Well, John ate oatmeal before his race. Some people might not be able to tolerate that, but John's perfectly fine tolerating, maybe 60 grams of fiber before or not 60 grams, 60, grams of carbohydrates before he runs a race with high fiber content. Yep. Exactly. Try it out. Right. What's the worst that can happen? All right, you get a little GI distress. Maybe, maybe you throw up in your mouth a little bit. I don't know, but it's Right, at least you tried it, exactly. Mhm.
Well, I love this slide because you have in that right-hand column, nutritional training recommended, and that's on each of these rows. So
Yep.
what's going on?
Well, you have to, you can't, anytime I mean, anytime you start training or you have to get your body is not prepared to metabolize consistently for an hour. Think
Yeah.
about it, right? You're not used to, right? So your body, you have to get not only physically, but you have to get your gut prepared for sport.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
I love it.
We also have to acclimate to temperature sometimes. All of the different systems in our body
Mhm.
have to acclimate
Yeah.
to physical activity. Yeah.
No, I love it. And from a triathlete perspective, I think it's really important to know what you're eating before you're going to race because you're in essence training your race day nutrition plan.
Yeah, and just so people know, single carbohydrates are like glucose or fructose, any of our monosaccharides, and then the multiple transporters, that's going to be like a combination, glucose and fructose, or maltodextrin and fructose. Those are going to be, we want to have multiple carbohydrates, not just a single glucose or fructose. So that's the
Good.
just
Correct me if I'm wrong. It should be a 2-to-1 ratio of sucrose and fructose is kind of what the
Yes.
science is.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
So
Good job.
two parts sucrose to 1 part
Yes.
fructose. And I think above 30 grams of fructose, you correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the fruit is the fruc 1 transporter that gets basically saturated. Is that what
Yeah,
called?
it's the
Fructose
reason,
1.
I think it's the fructose. Got my notes
I
over
better
here.
check what my ratio is for my Pop-Tarts.
They're probably, because you had strawberry, you probably actually had fructose, where if you would have had the chocolate, you wouldn't have had fructose in there. So I
Yeah.
think, John, the strawberry actually was multiple transporter. So I think that that was
Yes.
exactly what you needed to do.
I'm looking at the food label. It only says total carbohydrates. It doesn't tell me what kind. So
We're gonna have to get someone to look that up for us as we're going here. How much fructose in a strawberry? How many grams of? Was it just 1 Pop-Tart, or did you have the package, which was 2?
I only did eat one, so it was
Okay. All right, well, we'll get,
all I
maybe
could
someone's
think of.
following along. They can put it in the chat. How many grams of fructose in a Pop-Tart?
In a Pop-Tart. Oof. Geez, yeah, I'm gonna have some.
Well, it has to be a strawberry Pop-Tart, or you won't have fructose. I'm pretty sure on that.
Oh,
I don't know if it's do they use real strawberry? I mean, do they use like
I
I've never even
doubt
had a Pop-Tart.
I guess I'm being optimistic that they actually put strawberries in a Pop-Tart.
I don't know.
all right. I don't like how this is going all of a sudden. So let's keep.
Oh, I said it was good that you chose the strawberry Pop-Tart.
Right? Where did my screen go? I lost.
All right, and Tony adds on a comment here. Base performance gels have dual energy source, and there's several companies that are doing that, and so Base is one that is certainly zeroing in on that part.
And most of the companies, even like Gatorade, is multiple transport. You know, most companies have figured this out, and they're utilizing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as I said, I do not know specific products. I just know what to look for.
Exactly. And if you do a little research on any of these products and you go into their websites, you can find out if they, usually they'll even put down exactly what their sugar source is, or their carbohydrate source.
When I train, I always either use Gatorade or vitamin water. Those are my 2 go-tos. But I actually haven't, and I trained myself. And the first time I ran my marathon, I trained with a guy who does the Centennial runs out in Death Valley. I don't know if you've ever heard of that run, but it's like this run in the middle of the summer out in like
Badwater.
Badwater, yes.
Mm-hmm.
He trained me for my first marathon. And then after that, I just decided to train myself and actually did better with my timing. So I just continued training myself. And this was before I became a dietitian. So now I'm interested to see how well I do now that I'm a dietitian. That's a that's a whole other story.
So I hate to tell you, it's probably not going to work out for you. You know, I'm an athletic trainer, and I'm the worst with taking care of my own injuries. I'm just telling you. It's really hard to practice what you preach.
Oh, I know. Yeah. So are we ready to move on to the next slide?
Yeah,
The next
let's move
question?
on.
Does this
I
help
think we're pretty
everyone
good.
out?
Let's
Hopefully it
go.
wasn't a super vague answer. These are the guidelines, but I think the take home message is, yeah, we know the guidelines. We know we should train our body to try to get up to that 90 grams. But again, try some things in training. Absolutely. And try things in training at different period, like try things when you're in the beginning of your training, towards the end of your training, because your body's going to be in different, it's going to be in different stages, right? So
Exactly.
That's actually a great point, is that even as you age, what you can eat in, you know, what I could eat back in my 20s is different now that I'm in my 50s. And you know, that's always evolving. And obviously with women and premenopause, postmenopause, that's a whole nother area to unpack.
oh yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
let's go to your next question.
Oh yes, what else can it, so this is from Yoshi as well. Oh, I think Yoshi asked too about carbohydrates in the heat. Yes, you do. Anytime your body is the internal temperature increases in your body, obviously during physical activity, even when we're sick, when we have a virus or a cold, our metabolism increases. Absolutely. So we're going to need more fuel. How much? Great question. I'm going to be honest. I would test it out during training while you're acclimating to the heat. I mean, I know I'm still acclimating myself right now to the heat. And I'm continuously, you know, pushing myself, seeing what I can take, what my body can do. But absolutely, you will need some more carbohydrate in warm weather, just because the metabolism is increased.
Yep.
And the good news is because it's warm, you'll be able to take in more water at the same time. And so percentages where we want to be.
Yes. And on that, and I know on a previous electrolyte solution, I'll explain what that is, but very important. I'm going to talk about sodium in the next couple of slides, but I didn't want people to think that I was not explaining what electrolytes were. I'll get to that. So anyway, how else do I avoid bonking from Yoshi? So I don't know if my slides are still up, but I say you don't have to, I can just talk about this, but start fueling early. What does that mean? Have a plan, not just for the week before, but throughout your entire training, right? I say the marathon isn't the day of, it's like, or the event isn't the day of, it's the entire training period, right? So when I say start fueling early, some people will consider that like the night before. No, it's the entire training. And then yes, have a plan for the week before. Some people like to carbo load. There is a certain way to load up on carbs. That's another subject, but ideally you really want to start tapering off training. And some of you might have your own techniques, but this is what I use, and this is what some of the science shows. But just starting to taper off a week before, so that the muscles can rest and really stockpile some of those carbs. And you really want to start consuming about 10 to 12 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight per day. And I have a slide that shows you intensity and carb intake. And it's usually about a 70% daily caloric intake of carbs, which is pretty high. But again, this is if you're using carbohydrates as your main energy source. And the main way to kind of offset the calories is to maybe lower your fat content during this time. So that's one plan, is really start fueling, obviously training during your training, the week before, the night before, hours before, even minutes before. John, you fueled with some oatmeal. That's your go-to. Figure out what a nice go-to is, maybe an hour or two before the event. Pay attention to your pace. That's another recommendation, and really your calorie expenditure during an event. And this might be a nice time during training, is to start figuring out what your energy expenditure is, and to make sure that you're trying to replace that as you go. It's really nice. I mean, I've been lucky when I've done my marathons, I have finished feeling like I could keep going. And that's like a really nice feeling, I think. Like I could keep going. You don't want to be like
I once again, I don't want to give you a hard time, but that's not what you want. You want the last step and then collapse. That's how you know. That's how you know that you've gotten everything you can. Like, I'm not happy unless I get to the finish and I collapse and I cramp all up and I can't take another step. What's going on with you? Poor pacing.
I mean, I was exhausted, don't get me wrong, but I could have done another 6 miles if I really had to.
No, wrong answer. Sorry. I'm just teasing you. That's great. I mean, that you were that fueled and that you actually had that amount of energy left, right?
But you're right. We're all different athletes. That's a great point. We're all different athletes. I was super pumped that I felt strong when I finished.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I was just teasing you.
But I think there's an interesting distinction there, because I you know, in my race this weekend, I was spent at the end, but also I felt like I could keep going, which was good because, you know, in essence, I'm trying to use that race for a 70.3 prep. And so I don't, there's a fine line there. It's that's interesting. Yeah.
I think there's a fine line. And for some of you, again, this is, try it, see what it feels like to finish a race really fueled, I guess.
And I finished and I felt like I could eat, which I think it was really important, because being able to exercise at a high intensity and still be able to take in calories is really important in those endurance events. So,
Donna, since we're on the topic, did you ever think about, like, in the last like 3 miles not taking in calories? Because they wouldn't, because they actually won't get into your system, depending on your pace, right? So for me, I think it's like the last 2 miles, I don't take in nutrition. Like to me, it's not the only thing that can be is bad, right? If I slow down a little bit, take in some calories, maybe it upsets my stomach.
Right.
Whereas that, as soon as I finish, I'm like, John, like, I want to eat. If I can, I want to eat then. But I try and avoid stuff the last 2 miles. That's, did you do that, or do you continue to fuel in the last couple of miles of your marathon?
What's really interesting, I probably didn't for the last, I'd say probably, last 4 to 6 miles.
Okay. So like a half hour.
Because I only train, because in training, I only trained up to 20 miles. That's usually what so after that, I was just kind of like, I don't think I really took anything in.
Well, I like, and again, Donna, we've talked about this part, is the swish and spit, especially in that last part of the race where maybe you can't digest those carbohydrates, maybe you can't get them in the system, but you can tell your brain that it's on its way, and that may be good enough, especially in that last part is, take a thing of Gatorade, put it in your mouth, swish it around for 10 seconds and spit it out. You don't even digest it. And oddly enough, the science actually shows that you can have a performance benefit from doing something like that.
Yeah, I do that in the Ironman races, in the 70.3 races with Red Bull. I literally they have little cups and it's like an ounce. I just put it in my mouth. There's not even enough, there's nothing in there in that 1 ounce, right? And I just kind of sit it in my mouth, and this is a different flavor than what I've been drinking. And it seems like I get that. I hate when this Red Bull commercial, it gives you wings, but like that flavor on my tongue, it actually is stimulatory to me, and it does actually do something. So I think that's good. And I'll do the same thing with even like a sip of water. I feel like my throat's getting a little dry, I'll just take an ounce of water with a mile to go. But I try not to ingest anything at that point.
Yeah.
Well, you're still absorbing some of the carbohydrates, obviously, in your mouth.
Exactly.
A little. Oh, I was going to say, and also making sure you're properly hydrated. I know a lot of us hear this a lot, is making sure hydration, making sure we are properly hydrated. Something to do in training is to make sure you're not losing more than 2% of your body weight. That would be really important, to just measure what your pre-training, your pre-weight was, your post-weight, just making sure that you're not, because that can really hinder your mental and physical performance. I give some guidance about fluid replacement. Again, it's not set in stone, but usually we want to replace every pound of weight lost with about 2.5 to 3 cups of fluid.
Mm.
Sodium is
so
in,
you know,
go ahead.
the contrarian. Okay.
Yes, please.
So I love these conversations. So we're talking about practicing during training, right? So in a 70.3 race, I would say in general, I'll lose 5 pounds. Okay.
How much do you weigh? If you don't mind me asking.
Well,
He
I don't
doesn't
even
know.
know, but let's say, I don't know. Let's say 145 pounds.
Yeah, you don't want to be losing more than 3 pounds.
Okay, but if I can't ingest anymore because that will give me gastrointestinal issues. I'm just, and here's the thing is, I
No,
can
you're
tell you,
right. Yeah.
when we look at 70.3 racing or half Ironman racing, and people tend to lose about 4% of their body weight. Okay.
Yeah.
So what I'm getting at is, I love your recommendation, but I also think we need to train to, that this is what's going to happen, because you honestly, you get going in these races and you literally cannot bring enough fluid in, especially when it's hot, right? Because if you do, you'll throw it up. And so, and we look at like elite, especially elite marathoners, they actually plan a weight loss during the race of, now they're going up to 4%. Elite cyclists, and they're looking at elite cyclists, same thing, they're going 4-5%, and it's planned through this. And so I think that if we know that in our race we're going to do that, I think we do need to train sometimes our body to accept that and then learn how to rehydrate afterwards. But that's, once again, this is going against what like the recommendations by, for example, like the ACS are, but looking at what really is happening in the real world.
Right. No, of course. I mean, I would expect you all to be losing, especially in these Ironman races. I mean, I try to do the math myself and I'm like, how do you guys do this?
For me, I think it was 10 pounds in an Ironman.
Yeah.
Well, I'll add that it's unfortunate there are not more scales around transition area to be able to actually know what weight people are losing or not losing. And I think this is an area that people need to, if they want to understand their hydration strategy and understand how to build that, they need to understand how much weight they lose during exercise.
Yeah.
And that means weigh yourself beforehand, weigh yourself afterwards, and then account for any fluid that you take in. I think people don't really, the normal person, I think the people that you're talking of, Ted, which is, I think, I love that data, they've got people weighing them, at the beginning of the race, weighing them at the end of the race. There's actually only one Ironman that I know of where they actually weighed athletes at the halfway point of the run. That was Ironman Kona. I think it was 82, where they had to stop and weigh in because they were worried about people losing too much fluid. I think that was the only year that they did that. But people need to, when we talk about these weight things, I love the recommendation, avoid, some weight loss. It's inevitable. But I think people don't really truly understand how much weight they are losing during an event. And some people are probably losing far more than they may even be suspecting. And some may not be losing really any at all and maybe overhydrating.
Yeah, and I guess this is a good public service announcement against overhydration and hyponatremia as well, because that is an issue that we've seen especially in marathoning, where we've seen it, where people are actually finishing the race heavier than they left because they're like so concerned, oh, I don't want to lose anything. If I started at 145, I'm finishing at 145. And if they do that, they're going to basically have a sodium deficit. And that can actually be basically more deadly than dehydration. And I actually heard a really nice presentation on someone that kind of a world leader in this area. And his premise was no athlete really ever has died of dehydration, but athletes have died of hyponatremia. And so being overly hydrated is more of a life and death situation than being dehydrated as an endurance athlete. You're not going to perform well being dehydrated, but you're probably not going to die. Chances are you'll cramp up and start walking before you get to that point.
Yeah, it's a good segue into our sodium
Yep.
conversation too. I was gonna say, like, we were talking about this before, but some people are a little hesitant to take sodium supplements. But you have to. I don't know how you can do a race without taking sodium. Just to give you a little background on what sodium is, it gets a bad reputation, obviously, right now, because it is a preservative. Yes, it is found in a lot of our ultra processed foods, but it is a nutrient. It's a mineral that it's an electrolyte that's very, very important for maintaining our fluid balance. It's also for muscle contraction. It's for nerve function. It's a very, very important mineral in our body that we have to get, and we lose a lot of it during sweat and during physical activity. So endurance athletes, if you're doing any exercise 2 hours or longer, this is really the guidance. And again, this is just guidance. But really 300 to 600 milligrams of sodium per hour to make sure that we're keeping our electrolytes in balance. So what I used to do is I used to carry just little salt packets. I had little salt packets. I think I needed it, probably did hit me around the halfway mark, and I just put it onto my tongue and I drink some water. But you'll start, it's a feeling I think a lot of us can start recognizing that's very different than hunger, and it's very different. And some of us can have felt what it's like to need some sodium, but you're going to start cramping, and you're going to start feeling really sick, as that's the way I describe it. Really, the cramping, your legs are just gonna it's mostly just gonna be a lot of cramping and a lot of just discomfort. I don't know what you guys have experienced.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. The cramping, to me, doesn't seem to correlate very well with sodium loss, but just that feeling of ill.
Oh yeah,
right?
ill, just nausea.
You just kind of feel ill or nauseous. The one thing that I wanted to add in this, and we did talk a little bit off air on this, is society, like you said, is deemed, sodium as bad. And so
Right.
if you're, the typical athlete that's trying to eat clean and says, I'm gonna eat a clean diet, I'm not gonna eat any processed foods. And then they've heard that sodium is bad, so they don't salt their food. You can get into a situation where we talked about hyponatremia, but you could acutely, but we can have chronic hyponatremia as well. I've spent a lot of time looking at people's blood tests, and I encourage people to do this. Once again, you do what you need to do. This is not medical advice here, but look at your blood tests if you have them long term. And if you're chronically at the lower end of the sodium range, you're probably not in a good place to be. And if you're chronically on the low end, you can afford to bump your sodium up. And the downside, in my experience, and correct me if I'm wrong, once again, is, and where we see this is people with high blood pressure, and that sodium is an issue. But our endurance community are notorious for low blood pressure. And so I would really encourage people, once again, if you have high blood pressure, definitely, look at sodium as an issue. But if you don't, look at your blood sodium. It'll still say normal. It'll be at like 138. 137, 138. I think the low range is 135. But if you're in that lower, those 130s, bump your sodium up, and you'll be surprised how good you feel. And it's a real thing that, with endurance athletes that have chronic, subclinical hyponatremia.
I'll add, we also got a question from Bob here, and I'm not keeping up with everyone's questions, but that's all right. We're this nutrition topic, we're going to come back and visit again. Can you get enough sodium from your fuel or drink? And typically, a sports drink will not have enough sodium. There's a few out there that have a high amount of sodium, but you'll find that you really need to try to get used to it, because it's like Ted taking in salt water in the ocean, although he was breathing it at that point. But even drinking it in, it is salty. And 300 milligrams of sodium is about 1/8 of a teaspoon. So it's a good amount. You've got to practice getting that in too.
Yeah, 1 teaspoon of salt is usually that's our recommended allowance for the day
Okay.
is just 1 teaspoon. So if you, so
Mm.
that's why I say when you're practicing with salt, just get those little, when I say salt packets, you know, the little ones that come in like the
Yep.
salads, they're
Yep.
tiny.
Mm-hmm.
They're like maybe an eighth of a teaspoon. I'd say start practicing that way. Don't start, you know, with a
Yep.
teaspoon of salt, right? But yeah, start. But absolutely, I want to say that as athletes, especially endurance athletes, I cannot stress enough. You have to supplement with sodium,
Mm-hmm.
and especially if you're doing anything longer than usually 2 hours.
Well,
Sometimes some people will need an hour and a half in.
I'm glad you mentioned those little salt packets because I actually use them for my long races. I'll take a bag
Yeah.
of rice and I'll take 3 of those little salt packs that you talk about, and I'll put them in that bag of rice. So that's my extra sodium.
Yeah.
The other thing I'm going to add is if you sweat more, especially in the summer, you're going to utilize more salt, especially in Las Vegas, right? We don't recognize how much we sweat. We talked about the weight loss, but the salt loss goes along with it. The other one that for me that has kind of been tricky in this area is the indoor bike training or running on a treadmill indoor. I have big fans on me and it's keeping me cool, but I'm still sweating a lot. You know, if I do a 3-hour indoor session, I'm still sweating a lot. I'm still losing a lot of sodium. And you think, well, it's not hot. I don't need to bring this in. If you're doing endurance training, you have to do this. Like you said, you have to supplement with salt. I'm just going to throw up a couple of companies that I've used. I'm really a big fan right now of Salt Stick. They've got these tabs that are different flavors. Got some mango ones. I've got some strawberry ones. They taste fine. I can't tell you off the top of my head how many milligrams per tablet. And then I like BOA. I used those at my last Ironman. They're a spray. They're like an aerosol spray. And like one spray is like one serving. I can't remember once again how many milligrams it is, but it was really easy to carry with me. And then when in doubt, I will chew like a hammer or a Noon tablet and I'll just chew it. It's like fuzzes up in my mouth. It's kind of like when I was a kid and you had the pop rock things or whatever they're called, fizz things. But when in doubt, in my opinion, add more sodium for an endurance athlete.
Mm.
Yes. Yeah. I was going to say, you're really not going to harm I'd rather have a little extra salt than not enough, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
You might retain a little water, you might get up, but the body will correct itself pretty quickly while you're.
And I love the fact you said that you may retain more water, which is what we want, right?
Yes.
So you were mentioning carbohydrate loading. I actually sodium load.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 days before the race, I'm actually salting everything.
Mm-hmm.
And because I never weigh myself, I have no idea how much water I'm gaining, but I look at it as I'm winning. Like I've heard people like, oh, I don't want to gain the water. I'm like, no, I want to gain water.
Yes.
I want my cells to be as hydrated as possible when I
Yes.
start, because I can't bring in enough water during the race. So salt will drive water into the cells.
Mm-hmm.
And actually it drives it away from urine production, which is also winning. And so yeah, I think that people need to really consider sodium loading as well.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I always say where salt goes, water flows. So
Exactly.
I love it. Donna, have you looked at sweat testing? We had a question earlier about sweat testing.
I haven't looked at. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just asking. I was wondering whether or not you've looked at it.
I haven't looked at it like in terms of how much we lose.
Mm.
If that's the question, I haven't looked. I'd have to look at the research on what the average sweat loss is.
Well, I think I'm guessing Tony type in if I'm reading this right. I think there's some patches out there now that you can get to monitor your sweat loss and what's in the sweat. And I think, I'll just say that these are, from what I'm understanding, they're still being developed, and you've got to take it with a grain of salt at this point. So, yeah. Yeah, Tony says leveling the sweat testing to let you know how much you are losing. Yes, and this is the trick with sweat testing, is it may change day to day to day. It's going to change based upon environment, and so it's something that you really need to do on a repeated manner to really get a sense of how your diet is influencing your sweat. And then this goes back to what we talked about earlier, knowing what your sweat rate is. And the only way you do that is to really go out and measure your weight before and after exercise and account for the all the fluid. I don't know the accuracy of them off the top, but we can look at that. Tony, great question. All right, so here we are. We're at 59 minutes. We've covered like.
I know. We didn't even get to my thoughts on relying on body fat for fuel.
Well, we are going to have at least a part 2, if not more than that. So Donna, maybe give us some quick takeaways on the points that we talked about tonight with really the sodium, the carbohydrate, and the hydration. What are some of your big takeaway points?
My big takeaways are obviously you'll get all the PowerPoint, you'll get all of the information, you'll get the stuff that I didn't talk about anyway, but I think the big takeaway is that yes, we have this kind of guidance on our carbohydrates, but I really want you to use your training period to really find what is going to work for you, work for your body. Nutrition is very dynamic. Our bodies are very dynamic. I can give you estimates. Someone asked me about healthiest way to reach our, weight while we're training. I could give you estimates on what, how much you're burning and how much your expenditure is. And that's what it is. It's estimates. A lot of this is approximation. So, so that's why I also agree with, training your body with the carbohydrates. Absolutely. I love the idea of training your body with sodium. There's a lot more science we could get into on why this is, we should be doing this. I did want to talk about why our other energy source, fat, which is another really good topic, but we'll get to that next time. The salt, just reminding everyone that salt is, yes, in the American diet, it's obviously a nutrient that we want to be careful of, but as athletes, it is plays a critical role in our muscle contraction, nerve function, body temperature, or blood pressure regulation. Very important. So I just want a lot of you to look at your performance, right? Not necessarily what, maybe how much weight you're losing during the race, as Ted said, but really just taking into consideration your performance, your individual performance, and how it's affecting you. You can take in what anecdote and what other people are doing, but I really encourage you, test your body a little bit. Absolutely. And do that during training and see what, see what little changes you can make nutrition wise, fluid wise, that might make a difference in your performance.
I love it. Ted, what are your take home points?
Oh, this is just great stuff, because you know what, we're skirting the edge of science and practicality.
Yes.
I want to say that there's not a lot of great science on long distance racing, right? So 5-hour half Ironman, 10, 14-hour Ironman. And because it's really, really hard to get that science. If we do, it's often, once again, it's retrospective science, right? We're like asking people like what they felt and what they did, maybe doing some blood tests afterwards. And there's not much of it. So I agree with you, like practice this in training. Yeah. And my challenge to the athletes that I coach is see how many calories you can take in during training, right? At certain heart rates or percentages of VO2. I had an athlete one time ask me about salt testing, right? Or sodium testing. And I said, why would you bother? Just take in more. If you're that concerned, just take in more, because there's no downside to taking in more. And if you feel better, you probably didn't have enough. Or we could look at their blood tests and see if they're kind of on that lower end of the range. But even without even the blood test, just take in more. And I'm not saying 20 of those packets, in an hour or anything like that. I'm just saying more, like 20, 30% more sodium, and see how you feel. So those are kind of the takeaways for me. Donna, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This was great. It's always fun to talk to people that are excited about their fields and excited about, training and nutrition in particular. So I can't thank you enough for coming on. This was spectacular. And once again, sorry about yesterday. John and I were a little
Yeah.
devastated, but
No,
we
I was
appreciate
like,
you.
this is great. And I was like, you're gonna be exhausted. I was like, they really want to do this today? Okay.
No,
I can't
but-
even believe we thought about it.
But I want to close with one more emphasis on the training part. And Donna, I think that's a wonderful message because I think far too often we don't, as athletes, really know what we're doing eating wise. And we may have some ideas, but until we really, pay attention to it, maybe even write things down. And if you do your race report, folks, I'd say do your race report as soon as after the race you can. And write down what you recall taking in, because recall is not always great, but the sooner you can do it, probably the better. And I think my other take-home point is I'm going to put salt on my Pop-Tarts now. So
There you go. Did we get anyone in the chat answering how many grams of fructose in a strawberry Pop-Tart?
unfortunately, it looks like it's all high fructose corn syrup. So
Oh, no, but high fructose means there is fructose in it.
It is fructose. That is
That's right.
fructose.
You probably had more than 30%.
all right. Well, Donna, thank you so much. This has been great, and look forward to talking with you again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys.
Have a good rest of your evening.
You too.
All right,
Thank
and
you.
thanks everyone. And sorry, we've only have scratched the surface on the questions. So thank you for all the great questions. We'll keep trying to get to them. Thanks so much.